This is the story of the wedding at Cana, and um, Jesus performed this miracle at this wedding, turning water into wine. Very well known. I'm sure you've heard the story before. I'm going to read the story aloud, and then we'll walk through it. On the third day, there was a wedding in Cana in Galilee, and the mother of Jesus was there. Jesus also was invited to the wedding with his disciples. When the wine ran out, the mother of Jesus said to him, "They have no wine." And Jesus said to her, "Woman, what does this have to do with me? My hour has not yet come." His mother said to the servants, "Do whatever he tells you." Now, there were 6 stone water jars there for the Jewish rites of purification. We'll talk about that later. Each holding 20 or 30 gallons. Jesus said to the servants, "Fill the jars with water." And they filled them up to the brim. And he said to them, "Now draw some out and take it to the master of the feast." So they took it. So that's the, that's not good. We've got more. When the master of the feast tasted the water now become wine and did not know where it came from, though the servants who had drawn the water knew, the master of the feast called the bridegroom and said to him, "Everyone serves the good wine first, and when the people have drunk freely, then the poor wine. But you have kept the good wine until now." This, the first of his signs, Jesus did at Cana in Galilee and manifested his glory, and his disciples believed in him. So this is different from most of the rest of the Synoptic Gospels. John primarily he focuses on Judea, the southern part of Israel. But this happened in Galilee, the northern part of Israel. And the Synoptic Gospels largely have Jesus in Galilee instead of Judea. So this is one of the few places where John is telling a story that took place in Galilee rather than in Judea. John's Gospel, as we've talked about, has a laser-like focus not only on who Jesus is, but his death and his resurrection. And all of that happened in Jerusalem. So he focuses on Jerusalem. So this is one of 3 stories in the Gospel of John that happens in Galilee, in Cana of Galilee. So you can see here, this is the Sea of Galilee, and obviously Judea is south of here. But it's a little bit a ways from the Sea of Galilee. But it's not far from Nazareth. It was about an hour's walk, which would be a short walk in those days, from Nazareth to Cana. Cana was a very insignificant village. And as I said, about an hour's walk away from Nazareth. But that's interesting to me that Jesus, the Lord of the universe, decides to do his first miracle, a public miracle at least, in this insignificant place, this little village. He could have gone anywhere. He could have gone to Jerusalem and done done a miracle in front of hundreds of people. And as it was, only a very few people knew what had actually happened. Now, it says that this is his first miracle. That's possible. We don't know for sure, because the Gospels, even taken all 4 of them, don't tell us everything that Jesus did. In fact, John says that at the end of his Gospel, that now Jesus did a whole lot of other, this is the AKV, Jesus did a whole lot of other things while he was on earth, but these were written that you might believe that Jesus is the Christ, the Son of God, and by believing you might have life in his name. But it tells us it's his first miracle, maybe his first miracle that people saw, maybe his very first miracle. We don't know for sure. Yes.
It was like it was such a small area, and everybody knew. Like there was a certain amount of people that knew what happened,
Right.
and so his mom knew it, and like servants and all that,
And his disciples.
and his disciples. Like how did nobody just go out and tell other people, and then everybody knew that he was getting married? If that was supposedly his first one, and people find out, or was it just
And
nobody saying it?
that's going to happen. But remember what he told his, and it doesn't say this here. Remember what he almost always told his disciples: "Don't tell anyone." But word's going to get out, obviously, and we don't know. After this, we don't hear anything more about that, so we don't know how many people knew, and we don't know how far it's spread. But obviously, John was there and witnessed it. Witnessed it. So so we're looking at Cana there, and it was, as I told you, an insignificant village. But this, but yeah, but Jesus is doing something interesting here. I'm going to take a little time out to tell you a brief story. When my daughter Katie, who's now 29, was about 4 years old, our church had what was called it was VBS basically, but it was VBS for the family, and it was at night. And so so I was asked to be the Bible teacher, the Bible story teacher for the preschoolers. I've literally taught preschoolers through adults, and so this was the story I was telling. So I tell the story, and then afterward, the woman who was in charge, whose name was Donna, and she sounded and looked like a former Miss America contestant from Georgia. And she came up and she said, "You are so good. You did the best job in telling that story. I was just so transfixed, and it was just wonderful. You are going to be my Bible teacher forever." I'm like, okay, I'm not going to sign a contract, but okay. So we go home, and the next morning we're having breakfast in the kitchen. And my husband's there, and all three kids are around the table. I don't think I probably was cooking or serving them or whatever, but I don't think I was sitting down. But my husband said to Katie, "Katie, was your mommy your teacher last night?" And Katie said, "Yes." And my husband said, "So what story did she tell?" And Katie said, "She told the story that when Jesus got married." Like I went to Donna the next night when we went again. I said, "However good you thought I wasn't that good because my own daughter didn't get the meaning of the story." So so I always think of that when I teach this particular lesson. So just to make sure you understand, it was not Jesus's wedding. So they had to, so Jesus and his disciples had to walk a long ways to get from where they were, right? Let's where they were. It's somewhere around there. I've told you we don't know exactly where it is, but we do know it was on the other side of the Jordan River, and in the south part of in Judea, in the south part of Israel. And then you see way up there near Nazareth is Cana. So it would have taken them 3 days to get 3 days of walking to get from Bethbara to. It would have been more than 24 hours of walking alone. What?
Did they walk through?
No, they probably rested at night. So that's why it took three days. So yeah, so they had a hike, right, and probably 36 to 40 hours of travel altogether. And you think going to the Ozarks in your car is hard, right? You know, that would be tough. So sorry. So, well, let's talk about the time of the event. It says that it was the third day. We don't know exactly. I would say the curriculum would disagree with me that that we don't know for sure what that means. The third day from what? The curriculum says it was the third day of Jesus's public ministry. I'm I don't think that makes sense of the timing. I could be wrong, and again, you can trash talk me in heaven if I'm wrong. But I don't think maybe the third day after they left Bethbara, that makes more sense to me. And you can I mean I think you can probably see that there might be some significance, some symbolism going here on the third day, right? Because a number of things happen on the third day, and most importantly, Jesus' resurrection. Now, it's not talking about Jesus' resurrection, and John is writing this many years after the fact, and after the resurrection. So he might have used that to kind of give them some, a reminder of what Christ did. But I don't think we can know for sure. I would be more likely to believe it was the third day after they had left Bethbara. Now, I've talked to you about timing in this curriculum, and you see there. I believe you have in your book that says day zero. Do you see that? Is that in your book? Day zero. Do you not have it in your book? Okay, good. That's good. But I'm going to talk to you about timing again because we've talked about this before. But they do timing the way we do today. Right now, if we were talking about something that today would be day zero, and then tomorrow would be day one. That's not the way. And that's, by the way, that's one of the reasons why they believe that Jesus died on a Thursday, because this is the way they do timing. So it had to be on a Thursday because day zero would be Thursday, right? Day one would be Friday. Day two would be Saturday. And then on the fourth day, he would have come from out of the grave. So, so, but that's not the way the ancient Jews counted. That's the way we count, but it wasn't the way that ancient Jews did. They counted that day one was the day the thing happened. And so in that case, Jesus died on a Friday and then Saturday. And on the third day, he rose. So we know. I don't use that timing. These are things that happen, right? We're gonna just say that this is some things that happened. Yes.
He's only on the tomb for one day because when they crucified him, it was like around like the evening or something like that, and then they usually like leave it out there for people to go and see, just as like a proclamation, and then like the next day they go into the tomb. So does that mean he was just in the tomb for one day and he rose?
No. So thank you for bringing that up because I want to explain that. He was taken down. They had to take him down that day because it was uh, the oh shoot, the Sabbath was coming.
Oh,
They couldn't leave the bodies on. However, they did it with other people. It doesn't matter. It's just how they did it with Jesus, right? And so we hear in the Gospels that they had to take him down before Sabbath and get him buried before the Sabbath started at sun. I can't ever remember if it's sundown, sunset, or sundown, but it's one or the other on Friday, and it was Friday, so they had to get him down. So now the other thing you need to know is that Jews and most ancient people counted any part of a day as a day. So day one, right, was Friday, and day two, when he was a full day, uh, then that was Saturday, and then he rose on, and so that was day 3, and he rose on the 3rd day. So that's how ancient Jews and most ancient peoples counted things. So that's why there's a problem with counting in this curriculum. So so I'm not going to do any day 0, day 1, day 2 the way they do. So um, so and then the other thing is, because they're using these days, we're just going to call this things that happened in Christ's early in Christ's ministry. That's what we're going to call it. They're things that happened early in Christ's ministry. We're not going to affix days to them. So, and it says here that it was the first official day of Christ's ministry. Maybe, but I don't think so. But because I think his ministry started when he started calling his disciples, right? So I think this is what happened when he went to Cana. That's all. I'm not gonna, say that's the beginning of his ministry. I think that happened before this. And we've talked about him being at Bethbara and calling disciples and John saying he's the Lamb of God, and John saying go with Jesus and all that. So we're not going to go through that again. That he called Philip and Philip told Nathaniel, and Nathaniel was following Jesus. And so then and then they left. They left that place and walked 60 to 70 miles. So we're talking like, if we start now, is it close to Lincoln or maybe just outside of Lincoln on the other side? It's going to take you a while to walk that, isn't it? So yeah, it took a long time. And then it took 3 days to get there, right? So on the 3rd day, he was in Galilee. And we can't know for sure what they meant by what it means by the 3rd day, but that's my best guess. Is that on the 3rd day after they left Bethbara, they came to Galilee and came to Cana in Galilee. And so they would have been walking for probably, because they'd have to stop and rest and they'd have to sleep, but probably they were walking for 24 hours. And so it was a long way, but that was the culture in that day. The significance of the 3rd day. Do you see anything in here that might have significance in John, that a reason why John would say on the 3rd day? What? Yeah. Yes.
Is there like prophecies like that? Like
possibly,
or
but
like didn't Jesus say something in there to them about like something about how
yeah, and he rose on. And I think they might have looked back at that and seen that. I don't know that they would have realized it then. The curriculum says, and if you have a blank here, you can put it in the Godhead, the Trinity. But I don't think the Trinity is in view there. I don't think that has anything to do with it. Maybe John recognized it later, but at the time it hadn't. At the time it happened, he hadn't risen, right? He was still alive, so I don't think that's germane. And then the resurrection and the life is more plausible. But the other option is that it's merely a fact, and that's probably the most reasonable one. But perhaps it could be all 3, or perhaps none of them. We just don't know for sure. So let's talk about the ceremony. So the ceremony. For the ceremony, the groom would go with his friends to the bride's house, and they'd get her and bring her back in this procession of friends, very uh, very happy and boisterous procession back to the groom's family where they would be married, and they'd be surrounded by friends. There'd be a large meal. There'd be a celebration for all the guests, and that festival of a wedding could last for 7 days. Um, Now that was probably very wealthy people, but usually they were at least 1 or 2 or 3 days. And then there'd be this host, this person in charge of the banquet, and that person was tasked with getting. Think wedding planner, okay? When you hear that host, so um, they would have to make sure they had everything that was needed, not only for the wedding but for the big banquet afterward. And so to run out of anything would have been unforgivable. It would have been, uh, it would have made the family look really bad that they didn't provide for their guests. But that's exactly what happened. And so that's why Mary was so upset about what was happening. Uh, yeah, the feast would be from 2 to 7 days, and it was directed by a governor. So let's talk a little bit about the guest list. So the presence of Mary being there, Mary, Jesus' mother, um, probably means, and there's no mention of Joseph. And usually a woman would have been identified by her husband, um, but unless she was a widow. So it's quite likely that by this time Joseph was dead. But she seemed to feel some sort of obligation to help solve the problem. So she might have been a family member, or she might have been a friend, or she might have just been a nosy person who wanted to, get something fixed that she didn't need to do. I understand that. I do that sometimes. Um, but by the way, the last time we see Joseph in the Gospels is when Jesus was 12 years old. So we don't know exactly when he died, but sometime between um, uh, when he was 12 and when he started his ministry. So and maybe why did they run out of wine? Why maybe they weren't expecting his disciples to come with him, and they like to drink wine or something. We just don't know for sure. And so but the problem is that there is no wine. So we're going to stop with the problem, and we'll probably finish this tomorrow. We'll stop here. No, wait, no, we're not. I'm sorry. Okay, the solution is where we're going to stop. So let's finish this real fast. So when the wine ran out, the mother of Jesus said to him, "They have no wine." And she's going to Jesus and asking for his help. She doesn't actually say that, but it's implied. And so it's an embarrassing problem that the host hadn't provided enough wine, and he may have underestimated how much wine was needed, or maybe these extra disciples that Jesus brought. But I don't think that would be enough to have them run out of wine, but maybe, I don't know. I don't know if they were big drinkers or not. But something caused a shortage, and we don't know whose fault it is. But whatever the problem, it was clear that um, they didn't have what they needed uh, to uh, to give to the guests. Um, and I don't know. I could see Mary getting mad at Jesus for bringing these extra people that they couldn't provide for. It's all your fault, and bringing these guys over here. But we don't know for sure. But something had to be done. And so in that uh, position, Mary turns to Jesus in her need. Would that we would all do that we would turn to Jesus in our need. And I don't think the curriculum says that she was hoping for a miracle. I don't think that's necessarily true. In fact, I don't think it's true at all. I think she was just looking to her eldest son and saying, "Would you help me?" And how would she know to ask for a miracle if this literally is his first miracle? He hasn't done one yet. Yeah, um, I don't think that she was looking for a miracle. But the wine in this account has symbolic import. Um, Wine was an illustration of joy and of um, abundance. And what the curriculum says is that the Jews had lost their joy, and that's what this symbolizes. And that's possible. I'll say that's possible. But I think even more, Judaism had become something it was never intended to be. It was never intended to be dudaless um, rules. Now, there are lots of rules in Judaism, but they were not living the way God wanted them to live. And so I think that has more to do with it, that they were just going through the motions of do this and do that and do that. That's all we got to do. We got to just do this. We got to do this sacrifice. We got to give these alms, and then we're good. And there was no relationship. There was no joy in that. But even with that, I think something deeper is going on, and we'll discuss it. Just not today, but we'll talk about that when we get to into the insert. So we're going to stop there, and we'll start with the solution tomorrow. We'll finish this up, and if there's time, I will have you start those insert questions about the wedding of Cana. We're done. You can chat.